Yes, I believe that President Barzani's influence in Syria has been very positive. Since 2012, President Barzani, since actually 2011, President Barzani has been standing against the dictatorial Assad regime in Syria, and since very early on supported, Kurdish opposition movements and groups such as the Kurdish Democratic Party in Syria and other Kurdish parties that were part of what was originally called the Kurdish National Council and was formed with the help of President Barzani. And for the past 4 years, President Barzani has tried to strengthen the influence of these Kurdish revolutionaries in the Kurdish National Council, strengthen their voice, mediate with them to have them join the Syrian opposition coalition and have them reach out to the Kurds and make some compromises on certain issues, such as, for example, an historic accord that they signed in which President Barzani was a major factor in. The name Arab was taken out of the name of the Syrian Arab Republic to become Syrian Republic. And this was in the historic accord between the opposition and the Kurdish National Council. I think that, unfortunately, however, with the rejection of the PYD party in Syria, which, as President Barzani himself has said, is directly linked to the PKK, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, which is an internationally recognized terror organization. They have consistently rejected any efforts by President Barzani to get in and push for the Kurdish issue and push for for a democratic and free Syria. Very early on, President Barzani offered Peshmerga to enter Syria. This was in 2012. Definitely. Well, I think the American role currently is a confused policy. Unfortunately, there is not much understanding of the distinctions between the Kurdish groups in the region. There is a wrong assumption by some in Washington that the PYD represents all Syrian Kurds, which is nothing but further from the truth for anything, and that even that Barzani is aligned with the PYD, even though he's called them aligned with the PKK. Now, I think where U.S. policy could be improved in terms of Iraq, I think we need to arm the Peshmerga directly. I think, unfortunately, the current policy that President Obama is pushing is arming the Peshmerga through Baghdad. And in Baghdad, we have a corrupt central government that is increasingly being aligned with sectarian militias tied to Iran and counterintuitive to our interests, while the Iraqi Kurdistan regional government has been a staunch ally of the United States, a stabilizing factor in the region, and very successful in the fight against ISIS. Well, I think one of the fears of arming the Peshmerga directly is that it would lead to some sort of Kurdish independence or something of that nature, or that it would rock the boat. So I think actually there's a fear of having too much regional influence on this issue. However, right now I think there's no other option. I think arming the Peshmerga directly circumvents the corrupt government in Baghdad. It gives the Peshmerga a direct role in the important fight right now against ISIS. But I think another thing that the U.S. should push for, if they're serious, instead of supporting the PYD, which is going to have regional impact in threatening both the KRG. Yes. Definitely, that's an excellent question. I think right now we have the United States and we have the Russians discussing a new Syrian constitution as part of the Geneva peace talks. And I think that a federal system is, and this is something I've been arguing since 2012, by pushing a federal system for Syria, you can gain the Kurds, especially those Kurds aligned with Barzani and the Kurdish National Council and others, to be part of the equation. It will be a stabilizing factor for Syria, and it can marginalize terrorist groups like the PYD and the PKK. I think it will be the most democratic option for Syria because Syria is a multi-ethnic, multi-religious country. And I think a federal region, you know, there's some misperceptions of what federalism means. I mean, there's not a single country in the world, and this is a fact, that's multi-ethnic or multi-religious, that's a democracy that doesn't have some sort of federal structure. I mean, this is something that works in very small countries such as Belgium or Germany. So I think it should be the case in Syria, and I think pushing some sort of federal system or political decentralization as part of the talks in Geneva could be one mechanism to marginalize the PYD. And I think, unfortunately, one of the... Yeah, I support it. I think it's a good idea to like I said, marginalize the PYD and other groups. I think there's many different types of federalism and political decentralization that can occur. I mean, in terms of the exact details, this is something which should be worked out in the new Syrian social contract with groups in Vienna discussing. But I personally, I strongly support it. And I think one of the main issues was early in 2012, the Syrian opposition, and this was a mistake that happened with the Syrian opposition, of course. Well, the Syrian regime has been one of the worst regimes in the world to Kurds. The Kurdish language was illegal. Kurds were stripped of their citizenship. Kurds have been punished in Assad's jails. And so they're no friends of the Kurds, and that's why you see them being friends with a specific faction of the Kurds, them in Iran, which is the PYD, which now the US is supporting, shows that they're not supporting Kurds because they straight up said they are against the federal system. And I think to deprive the regime of such an argument, pushing for a federal system as a part of a new democratic Syria can have Kurdish support, more Kurdish support for the opposition, and for you know, a stable and free and democratic Syria. I think one thing is that in Syrian opposition in 2012, very early on, the United States could have taken a key role in pushing them towards pushing for a federal system. You know, groups such as Muslim Brotherhood and other extreme groups and Islamist groups were against the idea, and I think that caused them to alienate many of the moderate Kurds, which now caused the PYD to get so strong. And they're threatening Turkey, they're threatening KRG, and they're threatening others. And I think their alliances with Iran and Russia are going to severely affect the situation for Kurds in Syria and Kurds in Iraq as well. I think it's a major threat for Kurds in Iraq. Well, I think the PYD in many respects is an authoritarian party. People forget that, you know, early in 2012, the first people they went after were Kurds. You know, there was a consistent campaign throughout all the PYD-held territories to take out moderate Kurds that were opposed to the rule in any way, shape, or form. You see that just a few months ago they banned the Rudao newspaper. So the Kurds, the PYD, more than anything, are afraid of any Kurds that would oppose their agenda. And that's why they push for this hegemony, because they want to show themselves as the spokespeople for the Kurds. And that's why they rejected Barzani allowing in the Peshmerga back in 2012. And that's why they rejected, even when Kobani was happening, if you remember, people were being killed every day by Daesh, and it took Saleh Muslim a whole week to accept the entry of the Peshmerga, and now they're rejecting them as well. I think the United States, if it wants to have a smart policy here, a stabilizing policy, should immediately now, especially since they are supporting this group, unfortunately, in my mind, should push them to allow the Peshmerga to come in from Iraq and fight with them. Break the monopoly of the PYD. I think they should push them on their you know, violations of media and other violations. But I think allowing in the Iraqi Peshmerga into Syria not only will give more fighters for the fight against ISIS, but will weaken their stronghold into this group.